all from the top.
Sure, no problem.
But yeah, welcome everyone to Friends in the Corner podcast, stories and topics from around Kentucky. Happy to be with you guys for another episode. And it is September, which means it is Bourbon Heritage Month. And I couldn't think of two better guests to have on to the show today than Mark and Matt of the Bourbon Life. Guys, how you doing today?
Doing great, Dan. Thanks for having us on. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, Dan. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, I like to give my listeners a little bit of notice how I've learned about my guests and how I got connected with them. So, as many people in the Lexington area know, I'm a part of the Lexington Podcasters, where Mark is also on that same page, and he would post his show from time to time over the last couple of years. I'm also a part of the Lexington Bourbon Followers page, where I've also seen Mark posting there. So after about a couple of years of him blowing up my feed, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to start listening to this podcast here. Now I've been a long time listener of you guys, and you guys have just done a great job with your show and had some really interesting and awesome, amazing guests on. So really excited to have you guys here with me tonight.
Hey, thanks. We're excited to be here as well. We've been really fortunate in where the show's taken us. And from day one, I don't think Mark or myself would have imagined half of the guests that we've had on the show, and we really wouldn't have the show that we have and the following that we have, and certainly if it were just Mark and I, we wouldn't have the quality that we have without all the willing guests that we've been able to rope into doing the show with us.
Agreed, Matt. Very well said.
Yeah, well, hey, and we're going to be definitely talking about a lot of the amazing guests that you've had on here. But before we get started, can you guys just let my audience know a little bit about who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, I'll jump in first there, Matt. I'm Mark Rucker. I'm originally from Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, born and raised. Lived here all my life, went to school at University of Kentucky. Go Cats. Had a big win today. And yeah, man, in the first season opener at home, that was nice to see. And a quarterback that can throw the ball again.
Yeah,
that's really cool. I was telling Matt earlier, I think in the last two seasons, we've only had one pass for 50 yards or more. And today he had 3. So I'm really excited about that. But anyway, yeah, I'm an attorney here in Lexington. I went to law school here, got my MBA here, got my undergrad here at UK, been here for a long time. And been practicing law here in Kentucky for 27 years, I guess now, which is a long time. Started the Bourbon Life as an Instagram account back in 2018. And then, coerced Matt last year in February to start the Bourbon Life podcast with me. So we've been running ever since then.
Awesome. What about you, Matt?
I am not originally from Kentucky, actually. I am born and raised in Michigan. So I'm a northerner, and made my way here after I graduated from university and spent 5 years in Kentucky, and then moved out west and traveled quite a bit. Spent about 5 years out west, and then was relocated for work for a job that I had at the time back here in Kentucky, and moved to Lexington at that time. And I have been here since then, coming up on 5 years again. So this will be my second stint living in Kentucky since I graduated from university.
I can relate to you. I myself am not a Kentucky native either. I'm from the north, but I'm from Ohio. So as you can see, my Buckeye pride hanging back here. So,
OH, baby.
IO, big win the other day.
That's right.
So, but yeah, so awesome to have you guys on. And we're going to be talking a lot about the Bourbon Life. As you said, Mark, it started as a Instagram,
right,
which eventually adopted into a podcast and a few other different content. And love to hear the story of how the Bourbon Life came to be. How did you guys get connected to make the decision to come together with this?
Well, the way it started, I'll tell that part of it. Instagram, because I'm an amateur photographer. I don't know any other way to describe it. I just love taking pictures. It's something that my dad has done for 60 years or more. So I grew up with him, always taking pictures of everywhere we went, taking pictures of us, my brother and I, my mom, nature, whatever. So it's just kind of something I think he passed down to me, and I really developed the love of photography. So I enjoy doing that. You know, practicing law is, as much as people like to show it on TV as being some exciting, wonderful, eventful career, it's really not. Most of the time, it's just really boring. So the Instagram, it was a way for me to do something I was passionate about, which is photography and bourbon. And my wife actually suggested it. She said, you know, why don't you do something where you can combine those two things. And she suggested Instagram. So we came up with a name in December of 18. And that's really how we started. And then I'll let Matt talk about how we met and started the podcast.
Yeah, so Mark started the Instagram page. Let me just preface this by saying I had nothing to do with that. That is all Mark. So all of our Instagram following has all been his hard work and the time that he's put in with his photography and doing the research to figure out what people want to see on Instagram and going through that medium and that channel has been all Mark. So give credit where credit is due. That's been his project and his hard work to really boost our following that way, or his following, I should say. But Mark and I actually met, of all things, Kentucky, outside at a raffle for Pappy Van Winkle at one of the local liquor stores here in Lexington. We happened to just both be standing out there, getting skunked and not winning a bottle like usual.
That's right.
So it was a pretty typical raffle in that regard, but we didn't know each other. We were standing next to each other, and I overheard Mark chatting with a friend of his, and they were talking about doing triathlon, specifically Ironman triathlon. And at this time, I was new into trying triathlon and getting into that. So triathlon being the swimming and biking and running race. And so Mark and I just kind of hit it off because it became apparent to me that he had done triathlon, specifically Ironman, which is the longest distance triathlon. And so we hit it off that way. And then a few weeks later, we were back at the same liquor store and happened to bump into each other, and they have a great tasting bar in this store. And so we just sat down and hit it off and just chatted. And it was just a really natural, really comfortable conversation. And we've been friends since.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Matt, it's funny. I was messaging with Mark this week, getting things ready for this interview, and he was telling me, he's like, "Yeah, Matt's training for a triathlon." And I was thinking about that today. I was watching the Kentucky game. I had a whole bag of chips and 2 beers by myself. I was like, "Man, this guy's getting ready to go do a triathlon," and here I am. So I'm living through you, man, for my health right now. So.
Hey, it's I do it so that I can just sit back and veg for the rest of the day or the rest of the weekend. That's get my exercise in and then just veg. So it's the give and the take out of it.
And it's funny that you say you guys met at a bourbon raffle, and you were talking about how you guys met there but didn't win. One time I got real lucky and I won a bottle of or won the lottery and was able to buy a bottle of Pappy 15. And then last year, me and my wife got married and we finished off the bottle at our wedding date. So
very nice. That's a great bottle. I love the 15-year-old. That's probably my favorite of the whole line, other than the rye. That 15-year-old is probably my favorite.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mark, so you started this as an Instagram, and the Instagram account itself is pretty stellar. It's almost at 50,000 followers at this point.
I looked today and I'm actually at 49,995.
Oh, all right. So by the time this comes out, we'll get a few more there. We'll get you over the hump.
I hope so. Hit that 50,000 mark. Yeah.
So where'd the idea you mentioned for the podcast come from, starting as the Instagram and then transitioning to that next part?
Yeah. It's funny because at the time, I mean, the Bourbon Pursuit podcast was out. The Dad's Drinking Bourbon podcast was out. And, I started the Instagram, and there's some guys over in Shelbyville that do the Bourbon Road podcast. So they reached out to me and said, "Hey, we really love what you do on Instagram, and we would love to get you on the podcast." And I had already kind of started thinking about trying to do one, and I was trying to coerce Matt into it. Matt just, he wasn't excited about the idea, but we loved hanging out together and having drinks and talking bourbon and whatnot. And I just thought it would just be so natural for us to do this together. And see where we could take it. But the Bourbon Road guys had me on the show, and we recorded it here in my house. And after that, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. This is something I enjoyed hanging out with those guys and getting to drink bourbon and talk bourbon with them. And I thought, man, if I could do this once a week with Matt, this would be perfect. So I twisted his arm, and he agreed to do it with me. And it's been great because Matt's got an incredible palate. If you listen to the show, you can tell I just always say caramel and vanilla. when somebody asks me, what it tastes like, and I always defer to Matt. So it's a good combination, and Matt, we've joked, we say that we both have faces for podcasting. So, it's worked out pretty well for us.
Yeah, I relate to that. I've gotten listened to a few episodes, Matt, and yeah, your reviews are great. It's like poetry. When I get on here, and I do a few bourbon quote unquote reviews with some of my college buddies on my show, but it always turns into it smells like corn, so it must be bourbon.
Yeah, it smells like bourbon. There you go.
Yeah, I don't know what else you want. So
yeah.
So that's how the Bourbon Life podcast began, your source for all things bourbon. And I know, Mark, you are a native of Kentucky. Matt,
Yes.
You've been adopted here, just as have I. So how did you both get into bourbon?
Matt, you can take that one first.
I guess I've been trying to really lay some roots and get involved and really embrace Kentucky, not being a native from here. It me like had to give bourbon a shot after not really growing up, or we never really drank it around the house. My parents never had bourbon or whiskey around the house. In college, I never drank it. After college, initially never really drank bourbon, but when I came back to Kentucky, I decided to dig my heels in a little bit more and try to figure out this culture and try to become a part of it and celebrate it. And so for me, that part of it was bourbon. So just got curious about it and listened to what some friends were telling me about what they liked and started trying some things. And at first it didn't go that well. But it took a little time, and then started to figure it out a little bit more and figure out things that I enjoyed and things that I like. And it's really just led to an appreciation of it, even for going back to some of the stuff that I didn't enjoy as much in the beginning, now appreciating it for what it is and for what bourbon is, rather than looking at it. When I was so new to bourbon, it was either I liked it or I didn't. And now it's fun to be able to go back to some of these things and really take the time, especially stuff if we've had someone on the show and maybe a master distiller, and just to hear their take about it. It really sheds a lot of new light and new perspective onto some of the things that I've drank in the past and maybe not enjoyed. And so it's fun to go back and look at things in a different light and appreciate just how much Kentucky it really is, and the great culture that it's brought to this state.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well said. For me, it started, I'm going to admit this, but I was in high school. And I was on the academic team in high school. I never got to play on the team. I was just always the alternate. But we always had practice sessions, believe it or not. So we actually had academic team practices. And one of our star players, his dad was a huge Rebel Yell bourbon drinker. So when I would go over to his house and we would do these practice run throughs for the contest, I would always bring a Coke with me, and I would raid his dad's Rebel Yell. So I'd have Rebel Yell and Coke. And then when I got into college, it just kind of seemed the natural thing to do here at UK was to go tailgate and usually just, buy the cheapest bourbon that you could buy. And over the years, I drank bourbon. I didn't really get into it as much. Now, when I got married to my wife, she was a big bourbon fan. She still loves Woodford Reserve and Eagle Rare, both of those. And I started drinking it a little bit more, but about probably 4 or 5 years ago, I really just started getting into bourbon almost exclusively. I mean, I enjoy drinking a beer every once in a while still, but the bourbon has just become a big part of my life. And I think as I got older, I realized how important it is to our economy, how much it means to the state of Kentucky in terms of economic impact and jobs. And, the podcast, the Instagram, it's also kind of a way that I can do my part to get the word out, to share my passion with as many people as I can, to let them know what we're doing here in Kentucky and really promote what we are here.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a unbelievable industry to be around. I had the pleasure, I got to work for 2 different distilleries for a little bit of time. I was a tour guide at Castle and Key and Buffalo Trace.
Nice.
And so
Awesome.
Yeah, gotten to be around the industry, meet a lot of awesome people. And it's one of those things, like, because where I'm from in Ohio, not a big whiskey not a big bourbon area, a lot of beer up there.
Right.
And a lot of when I started working at the distilleries, a lot of my family was like, why would you go there? What's that all about? Is there even a job or career there? And then until you come down here and kind of go and tour these distilleries, you kind of, it's like oh, I get it type of
Sure
moment.
Yep, I agree with that. A lot of people outside of the state still don't understand what it is, and you know, a lot of things are changing here. Not changing, but I think the distilleries are really opening up more opportunities and more experiences for visitors. So it's not just a matter of going to a distillery, taking a tour for 30 minutes, and then getting a few samples afterwards. It's an opportunity to go somewhere, to have a tour, to do a cocktail class, to do a cooking class, to have a restaurant experience, you know, fine dining, etc. So I think a lot of the distilleries in Kentucky are really starting to pump a lot of money back into that to try to create these experiences for their visitors. It's really cool what they're doing.
Absolutely. Well, and as you talked about highlighting the industry, having a lot of amazing people on your show, um, you guys have had a bit of a who's who of guests on your show over the last couple of years. I mean, guys like Brent Elliott and Chris Morris and Harlan Wheatley, who I think's maybe done 3 interviews his entire career. So what was it like to interview these guys? And I mean, you've also interviewed people from smaller distilleries as well, but what was it like to interview, I guess, what you call the giants of the industry right now? And did you learn anything from talking to these different people?
Go ahead, Matt.
I think in my experience with it, at first, maybe I was pretty nervous, but then you get to talking to these guys and you realize that they couldn't be more down to earth and more relaxed, and they're not there to educate you and tell you you're right or you're wrong about their bourbon, even if the stuff that they make. I think one of my favorite interviews was with the master distiller from Heaven Hill, Connor O'Driscoll. I mean, what an awesome down to earth guy. Just sat around and we drank their flagship, nothing special bourbons and ryes that they have out of their everyday collection, and just so down to earth. It makes it really easy, and you realize these guys are, what they're doing is fabulous, and what a job to have, and the tradition they're carrying on is really amazing. They have a lot of weight on their shoulders, but they handle it with such grace, and they're so down to earth. They really celebrate the culture that I think brings people together around bourbon. And it doesn't have to be pretentious. It doesn't have to be um, upper class. It certainly can be. You can drink great stuff and approach it that way. These guys they're so down to earth. It was so easy to chat with them. They just want to talk about bourbon, talk about their experiences, ask you questions, answer questions, and just have a good time chatting with you. And I think Mark might agree that that's kind of been the impression that we've received from everybody, where at least I've gone in a little bit nervous, but you realize these guys are so down to earth. They're just guys and girls, I should say, and men and women. They're just there to talk to you about the same thing that we love. It's really just a collection of people that have like-minded interests.
Yeah, I agree with that, Matt. You know, the nervousness for me is the big thing. You know, it's funny because Matt and I joke about it. I'm kind of the guy that steers the ship, and Matt is like the color analyst. You know, Matt provides the great. You know, it's funny because usually before the show, I'll come up with a list of questions, and Matt and I share that. And you know, I'm like, yeah, I got some really good questions, and Matt just comes up with these questions during the show, and it never fails. Our guests are like, Matt, that's a great question, Matt, and I'm like, man, come on. But nervousness for me, because I'm like, I don't want to ask the wrong question. You know, I don't want to say something wrong to these guys. And Matt will tell you, I mean, he knows sometimes I'm getting better, but initially I think a lot of nervousness for me. But like Matt said, once you start talking to these men and women, it's really apparent how genuine they are, how down to earth they are, how much they want to just share their passion with everybody that they can. And I think the one thing that I'm probably most proud of is the fact that, you know, we do, it's not just the men that we've talked to in the bourbon industry, and we've had a lot of women who are really doing some amazing things and breaking some of the glass ceilings out there, like Jackie Zykin, who's the master taster at Old Forester. She's a rock star. That was probably one of my favorite episodes we've ever done. I was probably more nervous with her than anybody else. I don't know why, but great. We had her. We had Marianne Eves on, Lisa
Mm-hmm.
Roper Wicker from Widow Jane Distillery, Alex Castle from Old Dominic down in Memphis, Tennessee. So we've really been fortunate to have some great guests, both men and women, and I'm really proud of the shows that we've been able to do in that format.
That's what is really cool about your show too. Beyond and especially when you're from here, you know a lot of the brands and distilleries around here: Buffalo Trace, Wild Turkey, Four Roses. But then you guys branch out of Kentucky or go
Right.
into small regions of Kentucky, and you guys find these distilleries I've never even heard of, like Austin Still and Frey Ranch.
Right.
And I think I said that, Frey Ranch. Is that right?
Yep. Frey
Okay.
Ranch.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, as I say. Um, and it's kind of cool to learn about these distilleries I've probably never heard of. So I want to know, because the big guys we all know about here, how do you guys find these smaller distilleries? Have you guys toured them before? Have you guys been out to their uh, all their spaces, or have you just from social media, or how's that all
It,
work?
it's social media. Mostly social media. What a lot of times what happen is that if I see a brand that's been posted about quite a bit on Instagram, and that's usually where I do most of my social media is Instagram. There's a huge bourbon and whiskey community on there. So if I see a brand that's posted a lot, I'll check it out. And if it's something I think we could do a show with, then I'll reach out to them and usually get a positive response back and set something up. Sometimes we do get brands that just reach out to us and say, "Hey, we would love to be on your show." Sometimes it works out. Sometimes it doesn't. Our show is in 3 segments, so we'll generally drink 2 or 3 different expressions from the distilleries on the show. If they've only got one expression out, it's hard to do a 3-part show about one bourbon. So generally, we'll just say, look, when you get more stuff, we'll do that. But we have, it's amazing. There's great bourbon being made, all across the United States. It doesn't have to be made in Kentucky. As much as I love to lie sometimes and tell people it has to be from Kentucky, it just has to be made in the United States. But Texas is doing some great stuff. New York's doing some great stuff. Indiana is doing great stuff. Tennessee is putting out some great bourbon. Nevada, Frey Ranch out there, those guys are doing some great stuff. So it's all over the place, Matt. I mean, wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah, I think I think one of the biggest takeaways for me so far from the show has been exactly that, that great bourbon and rye is being made all over the US by all sorts of people from all walks of life. It's it's definitely a Kentucky proud thing, and the heritage is traced back to here, of course. But there's some really, really good stuff being made,
Yeah.
like in these states that Mark's talking about, by really great people.
Yep.
So what are some of your favorite distilleries or spirits from outside of Kentucky you would recommend to a Kentuckian wanting to branch out a little bit more?
Hmm. That's a good question, Matt. I'll defer. It's just like the show. I'm going to defer to Matt first on that one.
Oh man, I've got to say, some of the stuff coming out of Texas has really, really, I think, impressed both Mark and I.
Yeah.
With what they're able to do in their climate, and talk about taking advantage of the climate down in Texas. The young whiskeys that they're able to produce out of there that have the characteristics of so much older whiskey is amazing, just because of the heat and the heat cycling down there in their warehouses. And there's a lot of really good stuff coming out of Texas. I think it's also been, we've had a couple of East Coast distilleries, I think, with some New Jersey, some New York, maybe a Pennsylvania or two. And up there's this classification of rye called Empire Rye. And we've had a few different kinds from a few different distilleries, and it's fun to taste the difference. And the difference in what makes this Empire Rye is the mash bill. They're all of a similar kind of mash bill, but it's been fun to taste and compare and contrast those to Kentucky rye and Indiana rye and some of the other ones we've had. So it's been fun to taste the difference from all over the US. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I agree with that. In terms of actual brands Frey Ranch, you mentioned earlier, Colby and Ashley Frey that own that, he's a 5th generation farmer. So they actually grow all their own grains. And their story is really cool. If you get a chance, listen to the podcast. It's just a great story how they got into doing this. And Colby is basically self-trained, but man, he is killing it. I mean, he's doing some great stuff out there. So and some of their products could be hard to find. I'm not sure. I know they're in Nevada, but they may have third-party distribution, so you might be able to buy it online. I can't remember off the top of my head, but Frey Ranch, one of the other brands that Still Austin down in Texas, they sent us the Musician last year, which was their first bourbon, and I think Matt and I were just both absolutely blown away, surprised. I mean, like a 2-year-old or 3-year-old bourbon that drank like a 6 to 8-year-old, and it got a lot of awards that last year. So really surprised. But like Matt said, there's great stuff coming out of the Northeast. Michigan's putting out some good stuff. 3-Chord Bourbon, they're doing some great work up there as well. So yeah, there's a lot of great brands out there that people just don't know about yet, and we're doing our part. We're not just Kentucky focused. We do feel like it's fun for us to be able to reach out to these smaller craft distilleries across the U.S. and share their stories, because they're stories that deserve to be told, and we enjoy getting the opportunity to share that.
It's been awesome to hear him. Maybe one day I'll let my Buckeye roots ease and I'll try some Michigan bourbon. That we need a little more time for that. A little more time for that.
Oh, Matt, that's fighting words, man. Here we go.
That's fine. More for me. I'll take it.
But a lot of awesome guests and listeners of my show actually would probably know a guest that you guys had on probably, I think, last year. Barry Breniger of William Tarr Distillery. He's been on my show before, like he's done with you guys, and it's really cool what they're doing down there in the distillery district.
Yeah, it really is. We had a good time with Barry. Barry's a great guy. I've had the chance to meet him several different times. It's funny because we went down and we actually recorded in their facility, which is just concrete walls, concrete floors, concrete ceilings, glass windows right across the street from the train tracks. So recording down there with Barry was quite an experience, between the echo and the trains that came through and the traffic on the road. But Barry's a great guy. I love what they're doing at down there. I think they've kind of switched their marketing. They were calling themselves the William Tarr Distillery. I think they're going by RD1 now because they were the first registered distillery, I think, in Lexington. So I think they've kind of switched over to that RD1, but the William Tarr Reserve, the Manchester Reserve, which is a blend of rye and bourbon, which is really good. I think it's 7 years old. And then they also had their Inheritance, which was Matt, was that a 12-year-old?
12-year-old, yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. Now they're not distilling their own, they're sourcing that whiskey, but they're blending it themselves, and they're creating, and that's what a lot of these non-distilling producers are doing. They just buy barrels from brokers from other distilleries, and then they take them to their location and they blend them together themselves and put it out some really good products. But yeah, we really enjoyed having Barry on the show, and anytime I run into him, it's always fun to get to chat with him.
Absolutely. Well, definitely worth checking out if you're down in the distillery area right now. Barry's probably partying up with Mark Stoops after a big win. So
that's right.
Yeah, enjoying
Manchester Reserve or some Inheritance.
But yeah, so you guys have had a lot of awesome guests on your show, a lot of amazing interviews, and actually recently you've had a good handful of guests that probably would be recognized nationwide, including the Curtsingers, Toby and Julie Curtsinger. If those names sound familiar, viewers of the Heist on Netflix probably heard a little bit about them. And it's kind of cool to kind of hear that second part of the story after the cameras. And so let me ask you this: what was it like having them on? And did you learn anything from them about Pappygate that you didn't know from the show?
Yeah, it was great. And the cool thing is we've got a friend, Philip, that works with us, that does some website work and things for us. And Philip is from Frankfurt, and Matt was actually running a half Ironman race that day when we did the session. So Matt wasn't able to record with us, so Philip stepped in. But Philip was actually able to set that up for us. He reached out he knew Julie through family connections. His uncles and his father apparently used to play softball with Toby. So Philip was able to set that up, and they actually came over to my house on a Sunday afternoon, and we hung out in the basement, and they were here for probably 4 hours. It was really, to me, I was concerned about it just from the standpoint of, in the bourbon world, a lot of people still see that as, see him as this awful, horrible person that stole bourbon and sold it. And if you watch the Heist, it's not, I'll just say that the actual story isn't exactly the way it was portrayed through the Netflix show. But we had a great afternoon sitting down and talking with Julie and Toby, and he was very, very, apologetic. People say, yeah, he got caught. Well, yeah, that's true, but it's had a significant impact on him, his wife, his marriage, and his children. And he was very open and honest about that, as was his wife. So, to me, it was an opportunity to see these people not as just some character from a show, but to actually get to know them on a personal level and talk to them and really see the impact that it all had on them. So it was really cool. But the one thing I walked away with from that was that he was not selling the bourbon for what it sells for now. So I mean, he was not selling these bottles of Pappy for $2,000 or $2,500. That wasn't it. He was selling bottles of Pappy for about half of what they were going for retail in the Eagle Rare that he sold. And this isn't to excuse it, but I think the show kind of made it sound like he's making thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And he wasn't. I mean, he was selling bottles of Eagle Rare for $15 a bottle. It was just the fact that they were stolen, and he knew they were stolen, and he was selling them. But he wasn't making a ton of money. It doesn't excuse it. But I think the show doesn't really portray that. It makes it sound like he was rolling in the dough and making thousands and thousands in cash, and and he really wasn't. So
that's what I found interesting about you guys' interview. It kind of, I guess, in a way, humanized him a little bit more. Like, oh, I could see myself being in that same situation.
Sure.
Not saying I ever stole anything from my distilleries, but it's just interesting when you put it in the other perspective. And yeah, it was 2013. I remember in 2013, I used to find Weller at the bottom shelves when I was in college all the time. So yeah, very different time for the bourbon industry back then.
Yes, it was. No doubt about it.
Yeah. Well, and then another episode that you guys just did, and I actually just listened to it today and had a good little chuckle throughout the entire thing, was Tim Smith from the Discovery Channel Moonshiners. He's a character.
Yeah, Matt, I'll let you go with that one.
Yeah, he's he is exactly who you think he is. On TV, on the air. Even when we weren't recording, it wasn't like he was putting on an act. And as soon as we said, all right, we're going to start recording, he started hamming it up. No, that is Tim Smith. He's a riot. I think if I got 20 words in that entire episode, I worked hard for all 20 of them. He has probably forgotten more great stories than I've told in my life.
That was the funniest thing, man, because he doesn't have internet. He lives in Climax, Virginia, which is what his moonshine is named. But he does not have internet. So he had to call in on his phone. So we're doing this over the phone. We can't see each other. And as soon as we call, he's like, well, now I tried to call you about 5 minutes ago and nobody answered the phone. Now, I charge you guys about a minute. I'm not sure what kind of a deal you worked out with my agent. And he was just instantly on. And it was like trying to herd cats, man, trying to keep him focused. And, because we usually record about 20 to 25 minutes a segment, and we do 3 of them, right? So we keep it around an hour 15, maybe an hour and a half tops, man. And he just kept going to the point that I finally just had to be like, okay, Tim, we're going to have to stop, and we are going to take a break here, and we'll come back. But Matt's right. I mean, what you see on TV is what you get. I tell you what, if you've ever been down the Limestone Branch Distillery, there's a tour guide down there. His name is Stephen Fonte.
Oh, I know Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Stephen he's a character. I mean, he really is. And if you get to meet him and get to go on a tour, you think initially you're like, is this guy just in a character? Is this a character? I mean, is Stephen or is this really Stephen? And it is. I mean, it's really Stephen. I mean, he's a great guy. And that's kind of what it reminded me with Tim, that Tim, you wonder in the back of your mind when you see him on TV. And I love the show. I've watched Moonshiners all 10 seasons. I absolutely love that show. I don't know why I do, but I love it. And I've always wondered, is he really like that? But man, you start talking to him and you're like, yep, this guy is who he appears to be on TV.
My favorite parts of the interviews was when he would get off on a tangent and he'd be like, well, you got to look this thing up on the internet. Are you looking it up? You got sweet tea? You got to get your sweet tea.
Oh, I know. It's like, that story. It's like, yeah, my mom told me that's what Matt and I are both sitting there thinking, Yeah, he's going to tell his mom that his dad told him to drink moonshine at 5 years old, and his mom's going to be pissed. And it's like, no, his mom says, you just got to drink it with sweet tea, Tim. It'll be much better. Who tells their 5-year-old kid to drink
Yeah,
moonshine?
mom's there coaching him on how to do it, not scolding him on doing it. Yeah,
It's crazy.
So definitely a lot of awesome guests that you guys have had on the show. And
Thanks.
between social media and the podcast itself, you guys have really created this Bourbon Life brand and just grown it so much, especially over the pandemic, which has been for some people really easy to or great to make content with, and some people maybe they've struggled with. But it's been really cool to see how the brand has grown. And I've actually one other thing, I was looking at your website here, and one the bourbonlife.net and .net. And and one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting too is that you can schedule tastings. How does that process work?
Well, last year during the pandemic, I had some guys reach out to me that just asked, "Hey, look, we're wanting to do this." I'm a certified bourbon steward through the Stave and Thief Society over in Louisville. I took the class and passed their test. It's not a huge thing, but it's still something fun. You got to go through the process and study and take an exam, and you're a certified bourbon steward. But kind of learn how to put tastings together. And then I've attended so many tastings and listened to so many other people. It's just something I kind of developed. And they said, "Hey, would you be able to do an online tasting? Because it's COVID, we can't go out and do things with our clients or our prospective clients or with our employees. We want to reward them. We want to do something fun. And we think an online tasting would be great." And I was like, man, that's a great idea. So I just set that up and have done, and I've probably done 25 or 30 tastings over the last year and a half. And it's all been through like this, we're talking through Zoom. So I'll do them either GoToMeeting. I think GoToMeeting is one of them, and Zoom. I'll do them that way. But they will ship out bottles. They'll order the bottles. We'll figure out what we're going to drink, and whoever is doing the tasting, they'll pay for the bottles and have them shipped from a third party source to their clients or to their employees. And I'll have the same bottles here, and then I just kind of walk them through the process. What it's like to nose a bourbon, what it's like to taste a bourbon, how you should do it, what the appropriate steps are, and then we'll talk about the taste profile. And it's a lot of fun. I enjoy doing it. It's just another way for me to share that passion with people who may not have had a lot of exposure to the bourbon industry or to bourbon in general. So it's a lot of fun for me to get to do that.
So if you want to schedule your own bourbon tasting with Mark, go to thebourbonlife.net and you can schedule it there. One other thing I've noticed on your guys' following you guys on social media is that you guys also did a barrel pick not too long ago, if I'm right. Which I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that process, tell my listeners about that. And if you guys do have bottles still available, how can listeners get a hold of those?
Yeah. Matt, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, the process was super fun. We went and we did the pick with Bullet Bourbon. So we went down to their distillery, and of course we went on like the day after our huge ice storm this winter. So it was treacherous getting in and out of there. Unfortunately, we weren't able to tour their facilities as much as we wanted to because there was too much ice out. So for safety reasons, we weren't able to do the full tour. But they rolled out the red carpet. Melissa at Bullet really rolled out the red carpet for us. Literally, they actually had a carpet out to the sidewalk because the sidewalk was
covered in ice,
frozen over. So they literally had
actually had carpets rolled out. Yeah,
they said it was for you. It's
just because they knew we were coming or something. But it's super fun. They had 6 samples there, and we went through the process of tasting through them and picking our favorite, and we were able to, I think, unanimously come up with our favorite pick out of the 6.
Yeah, we did. And we actually did that with a liquor store out of Nashville. It's called West End Discount Wines and Liquors. And I've got family that lives down in Nashville. So I'd go down and visit. My wife and I would go to visit. It's her sister and her niece. We just go down and visit once a month or so. And I would stop into the store because it was very close to where they lived. And I started talking to the owner. And every time I'd go in, I would just talk to him a little bit. And I went in, I guess it was probably maybe November or December of 20. And he's like, "Hey, you're the Bourbon Life guy." I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "You guys need to do a barrel pick with us." And I'm like, okay. And we just started talking about it. And I was like, I mean, I've known the guy for a couple of months. I think he's a good guy. I like what he does. I like his store. He's always kind to people. So yeah, it worked out, and he set it up, and I mean, like Matt said, I mean, we just got to show up at the distillery the day after the ice storm, and they rolled out the red carpet and took great care of us, and we picked the bottle. It was in February. It came in, I guess it was July, Matt, when we finally
Yeah.
got it. So the
Yep.
store actually has it. They still have bottles. You can buy it online. The problem is they can't ship. So that is the biggest problem. Um, but you can, if you go to Nashville, obviously you can buy it in the store. You can buy it online. I have been known, or someone I know has actually muled a few bottles back from Nashville. I'm not going to say who that was, but if you purchase them online, you know, there are ways that we can get bottles to people.
Just don't ask, don't tell.
That's right. Just I'm gonna leave it right there. So.
Oh, awesome, guys. Well, hey, it's been great to have you guys on here. And as we start kind of winding down, one thing I'd like to ask you is, for people who are maybe starting to get into bourbon and bourbon collecting, where would you suggest they start? And do you have any? And I know one question I asked you guys is if you can name your top 3 bourbons for people to try, but we kind of covered that a little bit earlier with bourbons outside of Kentucky. But I think just in general, if someone wants to expand their palate, or if they want to start collecting, what suggestions would you give them for starter bourbons, or where to start looking?
Why don't you?
You're the golden palate.
No, you should take this one, Mark. You do the tasting,
Okay, yeah,
so you
okay.
have a lot of experience in putting stuff together and introducing people to bourbon.
Yeah, okay. So here's, people understand that bourbon is made from a mash bill, and to be legally considered bourbon, it has to be a minimum of 51% corn in that mash bill. So that's the primary grain, is going to be corn. The secondary grain is the flavoring grain usually, and that will either be rye generally, or it'll be wheat. So there are some bourbons that are made with corn, rye, and then malted barley, and then other bourbons that are made with corn, wheat, and malted barley. So it's good, I think, if you're trying to just get into it and you're trying to understand. I would suggest buying some Elijah Craig, for example, just Elijah Craig small batch. It's an inexpensive bottle, but it's a very quality. Is that what you got there?
Elijah Craig rye. That's what I've been drinking.
The rye, yeah,
Nice.
Yeah, and that's a great rye. I love that rye, and I love Elijah Craig. Anything they put out, pretty much, but just their standard small batch, because it is it has the corn, rye, and malted barley. So you get and it's a 94 proof, I believe. So it's not going to knock your socks off in terms of the heat. It'll be a good experience. You can get that combination of corn and the rye spiciness, and it's been in the barrel, for a long enough time that you're going to get all the nuances from the barrel as well. So it's a really just solid combination. And then Maker's Mark is another one to me, because that one actually is made with corn and wheat. So instead of the rye, they use wheat. Wheat usually has a little bit more of a kind of a fuller mouthfeel, more creamy, maybe sweeter. You think of like a wheat bread versus a rye bread. Rye bread's really spicy. A wheat bread's going to have a little bit more of a sweeter flavor to it. Kind of translates over to bourbon as well. So Maker's Mark again, and that's what's that, 90 proofer, Matt? Or do you remember?
Yeah, that sounds about right. Like maybe
So it's another
90.5 or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's another Woodford Reserve. It's just the regular Woodford Reserve, 90.4 proof. It's the corn, rye, and malted barley. So any one of those would be a great starting point. If those proof points are too high, you can start like Matt, and it's a segue over to you, man. So you can kind of jump in where you actually kind of started.
Yeah, I think one of my favorites and where I started was with Basil Hayden. That was kind of my introduction to what at the time for me was high quality, high class, big spending bourbon, if that gives you any idea on where I started in the process. But it's another great one to start on. And I think Mark really hit it on the head there, that there are some really, really great offerings, and it doesn't have to be super expensive to get really great quality out of the bottle that you're drinking. All these distilleries in Kentucky that are putting out their products stand behind them. And there's actually really, really great stuff that's being mass produced and released to the public for under $20 or right around $20.
Sure.
One of my go-to lately has been actually Old Tub, which I think is just incredibly flavorful, and it's around $23.
Yeah, it's funny because with Old Tub, it's you got people that really either like it or people that just really kind of hate it. And for me, it was a like. Um, for me, I think some people have trouble. It's a little bit tannic, which means it's a little bit of a drying effect. You get a little of the oak tannins coming through on the end of it, so it can dry your mouth out just a touch, or it feels a little bit drying. Or cloying, is that the term, Matt, that you always say? The cloying effect, it dries your mouth
Oh,
out.
the cloying effect.
Cloying effect. There you go. Not coy, cloying. Um, but yeah, Old Tub, I really enjoy it. 23.99 or 24.99 a bottle. So yeah, it's a good one from Beam. And the Basil Hayden's is from Beam as well. So they put out some really good stuff down there for sure.
Absolutely. Well, talking with Mark and Matt, the Bourbon Life here, and you guys have already, in the time you've been around, had some really awesome guests, drank a lot of awesome whiskeys. But where are you hoping to take the show, and where are you hoping to take the Bourbon Life brand from here?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. And what do you think, Mark? I know you've got some possible plans.
Instagram is definitely, the place where we started, and I want to keep that going. I have not been as active on Instagram probably over the last year as I was originally, just because the focus has kind of shifted to the podcast. And now we've been doing the podcast for about a little over a year and a half. There has been some talk of maybe moving into some video type of work. One of us is kind of excited about that opportunity maybe, and one of us is maybe not quite as excited as the other one. I'm not going to say it's Matt, but yeah, Matt. No, but I think that that seems to be a lot of people are really jumping into that video world. You see, obviously TikTok videos, which I'm not a TikTok guy. I've got an account for the Bourbon Life, but I understand it, but I just don't really get it. So it's not something I really do a lot of time with. But in terms of video content, I don't want to just be on there, me and Matt, talking about a bottle and talking about what we taste. I want to do something different, and we've got some ideas. And I think we're really going to start looking at that and pursuing that probably over the next, hopefully 4 to 5 months, and looking maybe to next year to really start something out there that people really haven't necessarily seen.
Awesome. Well, cool. We're excited to see where the future of Bourbon Life goes. If you need someone to help run the TikTok account, my wife spends way too much time, so I'm sure she would love to volunteer some time just to mess around on TikTok for you.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. My wife does too. I swear, I'll sit there, we'll be doing something, and it'll be like 5 minutes straight. She'll be like, "Oh, look at this! Look at this one! Look at this one! Look at this one!" And it's like, "Here's a cat. Oh, look, here's a dog. Look, here's Tony. Here's a donkey." Like, real, I don't need to see those, but yeah, she's the same way.
It's something about it, man. So
I agree. It's obviously people love videos. There's no question about it. So I think that's we have to kind of be open to that and look at that opportunity, but just do it in a way that's going to be, like I said, something different that not everybody else is already doing.
Gotcha. Well, we're excited to see where the content goes. Can you tell my listeners where they can find you guys online and where they can find the Bourbon Life online?
Yeah. Everything I do is through the Bourbon Life pretty much. So mostly Instagram, it's at and it's _Bourbon_Life. But if you type in the Bourbon Life in the search bar, you're going to find us. It's just a little like barrel head, a wood grain barrel head with the words the Bourbon Life. And like I said, we're right at 50,000 followers now. So please sign up, because I want to, get over that 50,000 hump. We're also on Facebook, just as the Bourbon Life. And we have a private group on there also. We call it the Bourbon Lifers. So we try to make that a little more personable, for people that join that. So we're trying to do some new things with that small group small. It's like at one point, I think we got 1,400 members, but, wanted to try to do more things with that. We do have the website, thebourbonlife.net. We do reviews on there, but I post the reviews also on Instagram and Facebook. So, so that's really where people can find us.
Awesome. Well, very cool. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on and celebrating Bourbon Heritage Month here with me on Friends in the Corner. And hopefully we'll get to have you guys on again sometime soon.
That sounds great, Dan. Yeah, I really appreciate the invitation. Appreciate the opportunity to share what we do with your listeners. Thank you.
Awesome. And then I'll hit the end button. We can talk offline here. But till next time, guys.
Thank you.